Palpatine's intense fear of Luke Skywalker is something that is highlighted extremely well in various Star Wars Legends novels. As we recently read from the novelization of Return of the Jedi, we see that Palpatine is truly frightened by Luke Skywalker's power. Vader himself senses the power within Luke, as Luke was now a Jedi that had grown past the Emperor's influence. Unlike Anakin Skywalker, Luke had not been under the thumb of Palpatine, and similar to his father, he had been forged in the fires of war. Luke Skywalker was a warrior, and he was extremely dangerous. This is something that Palpatine knew and sensed immediately, and yet, despite all of that fear, Palpatine found his power extremely alluring, as all Sith would, desiring to make Luke Skywalker the apprentice that he had always wished his father, Darth Vader, would become. Palpatine had spent nearly 2 decades grooming Darth Vader to become the perfect Sith Lord, to fulfill what it truly meant to wield the dark side as a near-omnipotent being. Through Vader, Palpatine knew that the Sith could rule the galaxy eternally, and yet, he had lost it all. But with that said, Palpatine at one point in time had the plan not to turn Luke Skywalker and make him an apprentice of the Sith and the dark side, but rather deemed him far too dangerous to be left alive, and had a plan to kill Luke before he ever arrived on the Death Star 2 above Endor. And all of this stems back to the conversation that Luke and Vader had on Bespin, where Vader reaches out and offers him something extremely dangerous. He tells Luke that together they will be powerful enough to overthrow the Emperor and to rule the galaxy as new Sith, Skywalker blood, father and son. This is something that is very rarely highlighted both in Legends and in Star Wars canon, but thankfully, thanks to the Legends novel Heir to the Empire, we know that Palpatine was aware of this moment and this offer made by Vader, and that he knew that together Luke and Vader were extremely dangerous. So much so that for a time, this was something that Palpatine was unwilling to barter with, and the presence of Luke Skywalker was simply too dangerous and too much of a threat to his ultimate rule. So today, my friends, we will be explaining why Palpatine ultimately wanted to kill Luke Skywalker, his plan to kill Luke Skywalker that nearly succeeded, and ultimately in the end, why he changed his mind. It should first be pointed out that it was always Palpatine's original plan to kill Luke. In fact, his original orders to his apprentice and Vader was to go to Bespin and kill Luke. It was Vader that recommended that if they could turn Luke, that he would become an extremely powerful ally. This is something that the Emperor ultimately decided to go along with, as Bespin represented something very special. This was a test for Lord Vader. He wasn't sent there expressly with the idea of murdering Luke. However, Palpatine knew that as the two of them dueled, he could deduce and decipher everything about their relationship, from both Vader's point of view as well as Luke's, to prod Luke in that moment to see just how attuned to the dark side he was, as well as to test Lord Vader to see how loyal the Sith Lord was. In the end, Vader didn't do anything that inherently shocked Palpatine by offering Luke a place at his side, but his suspicions that Darth Vader would attempt to overthrow him were a cause for concern, even though they were not inherently surprising. This is why, as we learn thanks to Heir to the Empire, that the Emperor sent one of his hands to assassinate Luke at a critical moment. It is revealed in Heir to the Empire that Mara Jade was sent directly to Jabba's palace on Tatooine, believing that while Luke would be distracted by rescuing his friend, that he would be vulnerable. Mara even reveals to Luke how much she hates him, and how she essentially took away all the power and safety that she held while she was under the Emperor's control. She commanded great respect and valued her place at his side. Mara explains to Luke that she had been one of the dancers within Jabba's palace, and was waiting for the optimal moment to strike down the Jedi when he was unarmed. That moment would come when the sail barge departed. Mara Jade had begged Jabba to let her on that barge, to be on the skiff that the prisoners were being held on. But Jabba didn't want any of his dancers present there, and wanted his prisoners executed for his entertainment. There was no need for dancers at all, and unfortunately for Mara, she was unable to join Luke. This shocked Luke, as he realized that Mara Jade would have actually been successful in that moment. It is revealed that after the events of Return of the Jedi, Luke had ventured to Dagobah, and yet again felt compelled to enter the Darkside Nexus cave there. Once entering, he had a vision of alternate events, how closely he had brushed with death. Luke was teleported back to Tatooine, back on the skiff. He could see R2-D2 preparing his lightsaber, but instead, when the weapon was launched into the air, it would be grabbed by somebody else, not the young Jedi. Behind him, Luke would see a mysterious female figure strike him down with his own weapon. It is confirmed here that Luke knows that what Mara Jade is telling him is the absolute truth, that if she had been there on that day, Luke would have died and the Emperor would have gotten his wish. Past these events though, although Palpatine is extremely angry that Mara Jade has failed, he is even more surprised when the Battle of Endor approaches, and Luke Skywalker is brought directly to him by, at the time, a somewhat surprising source. That source was Darth Vader himself. In several novels, including the Return of the Jedi novelization, we learn that Palpatine has always had it in the back of his mind that he wanted to train Luke as an apprentice, for him to fulfill what Anakin never did, but that his threat was simply too large. However, Palpatine craves power above all else, and actually seeing Luke in Return of the Jedi enter his throne room and sensing the boy's power, Palpatine desires that power for himself. It is too much for him to turn away from, and he believes that he has ultimate control over Vader and Luke, and that beyond this, Vader's show of bringing Luke to him is a sign that Vader is too weak. Palpatine actually looks at Vader in this moment as a weak, injured animal, someone who has given up to the superior power of Darth Sidious, someone who has been taught his place, and now realizes that Luke's place is by the Emperor's side. Vader's chains in this moment are too tight, and the Emperor's influence too strong. Palpatine decides to turn Luke using his own father, letting his father prod him towards the dark side of the Force, challenge his stance as a light side wielder, a Jedi, and push the boy to his limits. But that was not always the original plan, and that, my friends, is why Palpatine attempted to kill Luke before Return of the Jedi and the throne room duel, as well as why initially Palpatine deemed it too dangerous to train Luke as a Sith, believing that together, Vader and Luke stood a legitimate chance of overthrowing him and claiming his vast empire for their own. But ultimately, Palpatine's arrogance was again his weakness. He believed he was too powerful for Vader to ever betray him, and the Sith Lord's desire for power, the power wielded by Luke in that moment, was also one of his greatest weaknesses. It would have been much safer had the Emperor ordered that Vader kill Luke as soon as he surrendered, but the draw was too much. The Emperor had to see the boy. The Emperor had to know what the Skywalker bloodline was truly capable of. A prize that was robbed from him now had a chance to return, and his fascination with it was too deadly. A fascination that proved to be his death. At least at the time, of course. But anyway, my friends and fellow acolytes, what are your thoughts on this? What are your thoughts on Palpatine's original plan for Luke Skywalker? What are your plans on how he deemed him too dangerous and Vader too dangerous to have them together? But in the end, why he changed his mind? As always, my friends, thank you so much for visiting the channel and the archives today, and may the Force be with you.